There's a lie we tell ourselves about time. We imagine history as a ladder, each generation climbing higher than the last, progress measured in steel and silicon, knowledge accumulating like interest in some cosmic bank account. We look at the ruins of Rome and feel superior. We see the pyramids and think, impressive for primitives. But what if the ladder is an illusion? What if civilization doesn't climb, it cycles? What if some of humanity's greatest achievements weren't built by our ancestors learning to be more like us, but by civilizations that rose to heights we're only now beginning to understand, then fell so completely that even their memory became myth? In 1900, divers searching for sponges off the Greek island of Antikythera pulled something impossible from the Mediterranean seafloor. Encrusted in 2,000 years of mineral deposits, corroded beyond recognition, it looked like rock. But inside that rock was a machine. Not a simple tool, not a ceremonial object. A machine of such staggering complexity that when scientists finally understood what they were looking at, it broke every assumption about what the ancient world could achieve. The Antikythera mechanism contained 30 interlocking bronze gears, differential gearing that wouldn't be reinvented until medieval European clocks, and predictive algorithms that calculated the positions of celestial bodies with precision that staggers modern astronomers. This wasn't primitive trial and error. This was sophisticated mathematics transformed into engineering, a portable planetarium that predicted eclipses, tracked the Olympic Games, and modeled the cosmos with an understanding of orbital mechanics that we credited to Kepler 2,000 years later. The machine is evidence of something we've systematically underestimated. Ancient technological sophistication wasn't crude steps toward our enlightenment. It was parallel achievement, different solutions to the same eternal human drive to understand and control the natural world. And the Antikythera mechanism isn't alone. It's one artifact in an expanding constellation of discoveries that are rewriting the entire narrative of human development, forcing us to confront an uncomfortable truth. We are not the summit of human capability. We are one iteration in a cycle that has peaked before, collapsed before, and may be peaking again now. Consider Göbekli Tepe. In southeastern Turkey, on a wind-scraped plateau, archaeologists uncovered a temple complex so old it predates pottery, predates metallurgy, predates agriculture itself. 11,000 years ago, when every textbook told us humans were scattered bands of hunter-gatherers, someone organized hundreds, perhaps thousands of people to carve limestone pillars weighing up to 20 tons, transport them without wheels or domesticated animals, and arrange them in precise astronomical alignments. The carvings on these pillars revealed detailed knowledge of animal behavior, symbolic thinking of profound complexity, and organizational capacity that requires social hierarchy, specialized labor, and abstract planning. This wasn't a tribe. This was civilization before we thought civilization was possible. And then, inexplicably, they buried it. Deliberately. Completely. As if erasing evidence of their own existence. Why? The burial of Göbekli Tepe tells us something crucial about how civilizations operate. They don't just build. They choose what to remember and what to forget. They shape their own mythology, and in doing so, they control their future. Whoever built Göbekli Tepe had reasons to entomb their greatest achievement, and those reasons died with them. But the pattern didn't. Throughout history, civilizations at their peak have made choices that, in hindsight, guaranteed their decline. They become victims not of external conquest, but of internal logic that stops adapting. And adaptation, not power, is what determines survival. The Bronze Age collapse proves this with brutal clarity. Around 1200 BCE, the Eastern Mediterranean was an interconnected web of powerful kingdoms. Mycenaean Greece, Hittite Anatolia, New Kingdom Egypt, the Levantine city-states. They traded bronze, shared technologies, exchanged diplomatic letters in cuneiform. It was globalization, ancient style, a system so complex and interdependent that it seemed unbreakable. Then within 50 years, it shattered. Palaces burned. Cities were abandoned. Writing disappeared in Greece for 4 centuries. The Hittite Empire vanished so completely that they became biblical footnotes, their capital lost until archaeologists rediscovered it in 1906. What destroyed them? Not a single enemy, not one catastrophic event. It was system failure. Droughts stressed agriculture, migrations pressured borders, trade routes broke, and the complexity that made them powerful became the fragility that killed them. When one part failed, everything cascaded. The most advanced civilizations of their age collapsed because they built systems too specialized to adapt when conditions changed. This is the pattern that repeats, the hidden structure beneath every rise and fall. Civilizations are not static monuments. They're dynamic systems, and like all complex systems, they obey certain laws. They emerge when humans solve the fundamental problem of cooperation at scale. How to organize strangers, concentrate resources, defend territory, and transmit knowledge across generations. The solutions vary. Egypt built centralized divine kingship sustained by Nile flood cycles. Rome built legal frameworks and military standardization. The Mongols built mobility and meritocracy. But every successful solution creates dependencies, and dependencies create vulnerabilities. The Nile floods that made Egypt's stability made them helpless when climate shifted. Rome's roads that projected power became invasion routes. Mongol horsemanship that conquered continents couldn't govern cities. What makes you dominant makes you fragile in ways you cannot see until it's too late. The Library of Alexandria understood this, which is why its destruction represents something more profound than burning books. The library was an attempt to solve the problem of civilizational memory, to capture and preserve knowledge across time and space, to break the cycle of rediscovery. At its height, it contained perhaps 500,000 scrolls, accumulated wisdom of Greece, Egypt, Persia, India, mathematics, astronomy, medicine, philosophy, engineering. It was information technology, ancient style, the internet carved in papyrus. And it burned, not once, but slowly, across centuries, through neglect, conflict, religious transformation, and the simple entropy of political change. When it finally disappeared, humanity lost treatises on mathematics not rediscovered until the Renaissance, maps of Africa and Asia that wouldn't be redrawn for 1,000 years, scientific methodologies that had to be reinvented from scratch. The loss wasn't just knowledge. It was the meta-knowledge of how to preserve knowledge, how to maintain civilization's memory across the chaos of political collapse. And this keeps happening. The Baghdad House of Wisdom, destroyed by the Mongols in 1258, contained Islamic Golden Age achievements in algebra, optics, astronomy, and medicine that took centuries to reconstruct. The Maya codices, burned by Spanish missionaries, held astronomical calculations of such precision that modern scientists are still decoding what fragments survived. The Nalanda University in India, one of the world's first residential universities with thousands of students and a library, so vast it burned for months when invaders torched it. Gone. Every civilization at its peak believes it is immortal, that its achievements will endure, that knowledge once gained cannot be lost. They're always wrong, because civilizations don't die from stupidity. They die from success that calcifies into dogma, strength that becomes rigidity, complexity that becomes unsustainable. Look at the engineering prowess of Rome. Aqueducts that still carry water 2,000 years later. Concrete formulations we only recently rediscovered that could set underwater and lasted longer than modern equivalents. Roads built so precisely they determined European trade routes for millennia. But these engineering marvels masked systemic decay. Roman military excellence depended on constant expansion to fund the army through plunder. When expansion stopped, the fiscal model broke. Currency debasement to pay soldiers created inflation. Grain subsidies to pacify urban masses required ever larger agricultural extraction from provinces. The complexity of managing a multi-ethnic empire across 3 continents required bureaucracy that consumed more resources than it generated. By the time Germanic tribes crossed the Rhine, Rome wasn't conquered. It was already hollow, a shell of institutional forms with no structural integrity. The fall of Rome wasn't barbarians defeating civilization. It was a complex system collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions, while administrators kept filing reports as if procedures could replace power. The pattern accelerates in the modern era, but the mechanism remains identical. The Industrial Revolution represented a phase change in human capability. Fossil fuels unlocked energy scales that transformed agriculture, manufacturing, transportation, and warfare. The nations that industrialized first gained overwhelming advantages. Britain's coal powered an empire that controlled a quarter of the world's landmass. But industrial power created dependencies even more extreme than agricultural civilizations. Modern economies require constant growth to service debt, constant consumption to maintain employment, constant extraction to fuel production, and constant technological advancement to maintain competitive advantage. Stop any one of these flywheels, and the system seizes. The 1929 crash, the 2008 financial crisis, these weren't aberrations. They were the system revealing its inherent instabilities. Moments when the complex interdependencies that usually generate growth suddenly generate cascade failure. And now we stand at another inflection point, though we can't see it clearly because we're inside it. The archaeological discoveries forcing us to rewrite human history aren't just academic curiosities. They are mirrors. Göbekli Tepe tells us that civilization is older and more cyclical than we believed. The Antikythera mechanism tells us that technological sophistication can be achieved and then lost completely. The Bronze Age collapse tells us that interconnected systems can fail catastrophically when stressed beyond adaptive capacity. The burning of Alexandria tells us that knowledge is not cumulative, that civilizations forget. Rome's fall tells us that complexity itself becomes a vulnerability. These aren't isolated events. They are data points in a larger pattern, and the pattern is clear. Civilizations rise when they solve coordination problems, dominate when they exploit advantages, and fall when they cannot adapt to changing conditions. The time between rise and fall varies. The specific mechanisms differ, but the pattern holds across every geography, every technology level, every form of government. What does this mean for us now, in an era of nuclear weapons, artificial intelligence, global supply chains, and ecological destabilization? It means we are not exempt. Our technology doesn't make us immune to the forces that toppled every previous civilization. It makes us more vulnerable because our dependencies are global, our systems are more complex, and our adaptive capacity is constrained by bureaucratic inertia, political polarization, and a psychological difficulty of changing course when every incentive structure rewards short-term thinking. We look at climate data and see existential threat, but changing the energy infrastructure of industrial civilization requires coordination at scales we can barely conceptualize, time horizons beyond political cycles, and sacrifice of present comfort for future survival. We build artificial intelligence without understanding the social implications because the competitive pressure to deploy drives faster than the wisdom to pause. We maintain nuclear arsenals capable of ending human civilization because the game theory of deterrence offers no exit strategy, only the prayer that everyone remains rational forever. The archaeological record suggests a dark possibility. We may not be the first civilization to reach this threshold. The sophistication of the Antikythera mechanism, the astronomical precision of ancient structure from Stonehenge to Angkor Wat, the engineering achievements of cultures we dismissed as primitive. What if these are remnants of civilizations that reached heights comparable to ours, then fell so completely that only fragments survived? What if the cycle of rise and fall operates at scales longer than our historical memory, and we are simply the latest iteration, building on ruins we don't recognize, rediscovering knowledge encoded in structures we thought were primitive? This isn't mysticism, it's pattern recognition. Every archaeological discovery that pushes back the timeline of sophisticated civilization, every artifact that reveals unexpected technological capability, Every instance of knowledge lost and painstakingly rediscovered adds evidence to a disturbing conclusion. Human capacity is not linearly increasing. It fluctuates. Civilizations peak, collapse, and humanity starts over, carrying forward myths and monuments, but losing the knowledge systems that created them. The question isn't whether we will fall. The question is whether we can break the pattern. Can a civilization recognize its own vulnerabilities while still at its peak? Can it prioritize long-term survival over short-term advantage when every competitive pressure rewards the opposite? Can it maintain adaptability when success itself creates incentives for rigidity? History suggests the answer is no. Every civilization believes it is exceptional, that its particular configuration of power makes it immune to the forces that destroyed predecessors. Egypt believed the Nile made them eternal. Rome believed their military system was unbeatable. The British believed industrial superiority guaranteed perpetual dominance. They were all wrong, but they couldn't see it because the same strengths that made them powerful created blind spots. We're in our own blind spot now. Our global financial system, technological infrastructure, and geopolitical order feel permanent and inevitable. But so did the Bronze Age trading networks the day before they collapsed. So did Roman roads the year before the legions withdrew. So did Soviet power before 1989. The structure looks solid until suddenly it doesn't. And then the collapse comes faster than anyone predicted because complex systems don't fail linearly. They appear stable, and then they phase shift into chaos. Ancient discoveries are rewriting history because they force us to see that we are not the end of history. We are not the permanent civilization that finally escaped the cycle. We are one more iteration, blessed with more knowledge than any previous civilization possessed, cursed with dependencies and complexities that make us more fragile than we can comprehend. The question history asks us, through every buried temple, every lost library, every sophisticated machine corroded in the deep, the question is whether knowledge is enough, whether understanding the pattern allows us to break it, or whether the pattern is fundamental to how civilizations operate, the inevitable result of any system complex enough to dominate becoming too rigid to adapt. The answer will be written by our choices, our priorities, the systems we build and the systems we dismantle, the knowledge we preserve and the knowledge we neglect. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes relentlessly. And every civilization that fell believed it was different, right up until the moment it discovered it was not.